Very good afternoon, one and all. On behalf of TeamLease and TeamLease RegTech, I take this opportunity and welcome to all of you to yet another edition of a discussion with senior industry veterans on the topic of compliance. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting two senior compliance officers. Let me start with welcoming Kamala Kantharaj. Kamala currently works as a Group Compliance and Governance Officer and Deputy COO at Edelweiss Financial Services. She comes with over 33 years of experience with around 27 years in financial services. She has also served as an Executive Director of Bangalore Stock Exchange, and she was the first woman to functionally head a stock exchange across domestic as well as international exchanges. So you can imagine the profiles she brings to the table today. She has an in-depth understanding of business, legal framework, governance, and various regulatory aspects, and she's an alumni of ICAI. Kamala, welcome.
Thank you, Rishi. Thank you.
A pleasure to have you here. Our next panelist today is Dr. V. Rajesh, who started his career as a lecturer in Department of Commerce, and by way of passion and admired by the opportunities that the company secretarial profession presented, he chose to complete his CS. He brings over 10 years of experience in compliance related matters as company secretary, currently with Avalon Technologies, one of the leading manufacturers of electronic components. He's a company secretary and compliance officer. Under his supervision, the company has filed DHRP, waiting for SEBI approval, to file RHP and go public shortly. So he definitely brings in the experience of taking a private limited company to capital markets. He's a member of ICSA UK, completed UK corporate secretaryship course as well, and he has pursued his PhD in entrepreneurship. Welcome, Dr. Rajesh.
Thank you, Rishi.
Okay, well, compliance is a subject which is very close to our heart, and we constantly bring industry veterans and leaders like yourself and gather the richness and depth of experience on the subject of compliance. As we all know, the world of compliance is transforming significantly with technology. On one hand, Government of India is working towards cashless, presenceless, and paperless compliance, envisioning ease of doing business for the next generation. You may have recently seen developments such as bringing a bill to decriminalize compliance at scale sometime in the monsoon session of the parliament, and we are still awaiting lower level details. But all of these are steps in a direction where ease of doing business is on the collective consciousness of everyone, and the government is working towards some structural reforms to kickstart the economy while the rest of the world is still going through financial chaos. And on the same lines, corporate India has to invest a lot more time, energy, effort, and money in going from ad hoc, paper-based, people-dependent compliance programs to highly process-oriented, predictable compliance programs, and where the journey has to begin internally. Some of technology initiatives are not just technical in nature, they are cultural in nature. And today, we have a rich panel to discuss some of the challenges, how to adopt technology, some experiences around it, and so on, so that the maturity in compliance can be taken from their current levels to the next level. So with that thought, let me present 2-3 slides in front of you today. You may have seen that there are 1,536 acts and rules that govern ease of doing business in India. Subsumed under them is about 69,233 unique compliances around central, state, and local laws, broken down into 7 broad categories, and under them there are about 6,618 unique filings across the law of the land. At TeamLease RegTech, it has taken us many years of extensive work and research to put this data together. The 7 categories are labor, led by labor, which constitutes 30% in terms of acts, 47% in terms of compliance, and a whopping 67% in terms of criminality. So among the 26,134 items that are there with penal provisions leading to jail term, 67% of them, or close to 17,000 of them, come from the labor laws. Labor is a concurrent subject on the Constitution. Both union and states legislate laws on labor, and is a very, very important topic for corporate India. EHS, environment, health and safety. We all know what that means. PCBs, CPCBs, air, water, soil pollution norms, waste management, all of those fall there. Finance and taxation deal with direct tax, indirect tax, customs, FEMA, advanced tax, income tax, GST, and many other topics around taxation. Commercial deals with equipments, hoists, lifts, cranes, pressure vessels, boilers, tools, tackles, all of them go there. Secretarial, we all know, deals with company secretarial function, and industry specific are regulatory, which are industry specific, TRI, IRDAI, RBI, SEBI, and so on and so forth. Moving on, and I don't intend to go through this slide, a detailed slide, but this presents the regulatory cholesterol across states, union territories in India. But this is what it is in terms of unique acts and rules across the country. Moving on, for those of us who are looking for a little bit of clarification on what do we mean by compliance. Compliance is basically anything that Government of India at various levels mandates from a regulatory and statutory perspective. All kinds of licenses, registrations, permissions, consent orders, returns, registers, challans, payments, remittances, there's notices, disclosures, renewals, all of these fall under the category of statutory compliances. So with that, let me bring our panelists. Let me start with Kamala today. Kamala, over 3 decades of corporate experience, focused on managing growing companies in different domains, right from running a stock exchange, which is by no means trivial, to running a large financial services company. Tell us a little bit about your view from your vantage point on what are the challenges of managing compliance in India.
Thanks, Rishi, for having me on the panel, and welcome to all the participants. And I strongly believe this is a conversation-led session. So we have two-way learning process. We'll also get to understand what the challenges the participants are facing. So Rishi brought in very interesting data points, I thought. So many acts, so many rules, so many regulations. Is it humanly possible for an individual or a corporate entity to really tick all the boxes? So is compliance all about ticking the box, or is there scope for us to think at a higher level? Any new requirement or any change in requirement that comes arises out of a context. It doesn't just like that a helicopter land itself on us. Actually, I have been part of policy making, I've been part of execution and system implementation, etc. So the thoughts at both the ends are noble, but there is a disconnect between the intentions of policymakers versus the way the businesses understand compliance and implement them. Though numbers look astonishing, it is the principle underlying the requirements that drive the thoughts in the organizations. If those principles are sound, we'll always figure out, how to go about implementing a compliance program. So Rishi, you mentioned what compliance means. You said licenses, you said orders, you said many things. Actually, to me, compliance means it is the mindset. Means when I am interacting with various stakeholders, am I being fair to them? So it need not be only regulatory driven compliances. It is also about complying to the requirements of customers. For example, I would have assured them and committed many things to customers. If I'm not meeting them, that also falls under this bucket as per me. That's a higher level of thinking for compliance. So having said that, how do we really start a good compliance program in any given organization? If you think it is the intention that matters the most. Am I wanting to just please the regulator by saying that, yes, I have complied? Or is it culturally, I want to drive it within my organization, across my organization? Why I am bringing this point to the fore is, many a times what we have seen is when a new circular comes from either regulator or Ministry of Corporate Affairs, what happened? Only compliance people seem to tear their head, and rest of the people and organization are not even aware that such and such a thing has come. That means culturally, what is my mechanism and how do I set my bar on the culture of compliance, and how do I respect, being in line with what the law requires. I can't say something before regulator representing compliance, and last my customer service person is talking totally against what I have been telling the regulator. And these days, mystery shopping, all that is a concept that is actively there. Regulators also adopt all of this. So they won't go by what you're seeing and what you're saying. They'll go by what they're seeing on the other side as well. So to my mind, starting point for any good compliance program is how aware is your whole organization about compliance. I don't mean that they have to by heart all the 65,000 clauses that Rishi was talking about. In essence, as per principles, do we as organization declare what are the principles that we uphold? And does everyone in the organization who interacts with the external world know about it? Does everyone walk and talk what they're talking when it comes to compliance? One-on-one, I say something to customer, but in practice, I do something different. It's not a good compliance culture. So in implementing compliance program, one of the challenges that I have seen in various organizations because of the role I had opportunity to look at systems and processes of whole market. In fact, what we have really thought is that when should the compliance program start? Is it when regulator comes to you for inspection? Is it when you are doing some hodgepodge implementation of technology? Or so the fundamental question I always raised even in the earlier roles was, is compliance a coordination function or is compliance a functional function? Means what? Is compliance simply running after departments and getting their data points and go and defend that yes, we are in compliance? Or functional function means at design stage, at the architecture stage, at the ease of doing business stage, is compliance having a say? Are they part of the whole system? Is the organization thinking of compliance as also part of technology implementation, or is it a last mile affair, which only when people come, when investor complain or when regulator comes and running helter-skelter to prove that I'm on right side of the law? So if we take care of compliance requirements at the design stage, lot of worries will go away. See, I'm yet to see very great organizations which have created really flow-based system like they do for the front-end function. See, if you are doing, a trading, the trading technology is far advanced. If you're talking about, settlement, technology is far advanced. But when it comes to compliance or membership or various requirements, I don't think people are still have reached that benchmark. So there is a lot of scope so far as starting a good compliance program is concerned. So it can only be in phases. First, you'll have to set out your objectives and what you want to achieve. It's not an overnight process, but it is a continuous process. So organization has to define what its priorities are for compliance and then start implementing the program. And compliance, for your information, is spread across all functions. Unfortunately, we think compliance is to be worried by only some team members who are sitting in compliance department. But actually, today you take technology. In technology, there are various compliance requirements. There are system-related compliances, there is BCP-related compliances, there is switchover-related compliance, there is disaster-related compliance. So like that, you take any function within your organization, there are a whole lot of compliance requirements. Today, I bet and tell you, not many organizations have overall framework which tells them that, they are on the path. Everything is fragmented. When it comes to demonstration of compliance, they will all pull the data and present something. So it is not a fully automated system at all. Actually, if we create organizations which can really be a flow-based system, anything that is bordering on compliance from irrespective of whichever department, flow should automatically happen. Then comes the question of, are we escalating it to the board? Are we escalating to audit committee? Are we positively engaged with the regulator? All that is a secondary affair. Whereas the fundamental requirement of pooling, what are the various functional requirements and where we are today, baseline creation. That is the first step in designing a good compliance program. So interfaces are very important, but there is also challenge in managing these compliance programs, to be honest. One is ready products are not available. The products which are available, read the regulation, list it out and say yes or no. You have to give some input, it will throw some output. But actually getting into the intricacies of the organization is not happening there also. So because there is no ready product, organization should really think it is important and they should give priority and create this kind of flow-based setup, which involves cost, and people have their concerns on cost when it comes to compliance. Whereas on business promotion, they were ready to walk any mile. But when it comes to systems for compliance, monitoring and all, it is seen as, let's see when it happens. So that attitude is what I call it as the mindset. If we think that we have to be best in class and we are here for a long haul, then we need to think about the board. We need to reach that kind of a level. And the challenges in implementation, first challenge is your setup itself, which I already spoke about. The second challenge is many times the requirements that are coming from regulatory end are ad hoc, and they are facing a situation. As a remedy to that situation, they'll bring out some requirement. And from the time they put out the requirement and that effective date of the implementation, hardly any timeline is given. Even today, regulators tend to think that if they take care of regulatory end of the technology or frontline regulators end, that is good enough. Market will figure out ways to implement. They don't give adequate time. So there is no proper processes. The software lifecycle change management process, all is given a go by because you're in a hurry. Not to blame anyone, but you have a deadline facing you. You will do a hodgepodge job. So the quality in that change management will be missing because it is a very haphazard kind of a change requirement that is coming in. So we'll need to think, what is the good way? Okay, for time being, short-term solution, you put out something, but you can always spend time and make it foolproof and think differently. At least, next 3-4 months, are you putting that energy? Because new requirements have come up, these have again gone into sideline. So that is one big challenge when it comes to managing the change so far as compliance requirement is concerned. And thirdly, most of these groups are into diversified businesses, which are similar in nature. But each of the regulator on same issue has a different view. Then you're creating a system within your group, having different standards for different businesses. Actually speaking, if we distance back, if the principle is the same, then we can always adopt best in class, whichever regulator is saying the best. But because of the regulatory hurdles, and also because I don't want to do minimum compliance requirement, I don't want to be best in class. So we end up doing substandard compliance program across the group. This is another challenge is what I would think. And next important challenge also is when we keep cribbing that regulators don't give us advance time and they don't tell us. But we repeat the same mistake. When it comes to our customers, hardly I have seen effective communication going out to customer on various changes. See, today, it is a bombardment of information for customers. Have I looked at canning this information in a very meaningful manner? These are the changes that have come. This is the result. This is the impact it is going. So when I'm implementing compliance management, which is for betterment of customer, I have kept customer totally in dark, or I do a piecemeal communication. I think this is also a bit of a challenge where our focus could be there. So maybe I also give opportunity to the Mr. Rajesh also to speak, and then we come back to some of the subjects. I have several points. I'll go on and on, but the purpose of this conversation is specific. So let us stick to specific issues, if any that come up.
Sure. So, Kamala, thank you so much. A number of wonderful points. right from regulators not providing in enough time, even enough opportunity, even to make changes to the software and follow the software release life cycle, multiple regulators working with different principles, more focused on specifics of forms, formats, and types, often at cross purposes. And we have seen that no one can actually comply with 100% of the laws. If you try doing that, you will be out of compliance with the last 5 or 10%, give or take. Attitude, you mentioned, approach that an organization takes in thinking about compliance and designing a compliance program is very important. Most organizations think of it as a side or a support function. Chalta hai, hota hai, dekh lenge, manage kar lenge, jab hoga tab dekhenge. Let's focus on revenue right now. Let's not worry about this for now. So I think those are all very good points. But one point I would like to add here is a number of compliances that any mid to large size organization deals with India is mind-numbing.
Yes.
In spite of best intentions, best efforts, ad hoc, paper-based and manual systems don't work. Unless you have digitization of some form, chances are inadvertently you will end up on the wrong side of the law. On top of that, the number of regulatory changes that we deal with in the country in a given year are humongous.
Yes.
And we are one of the leading companies who track 2,233 websites across union, state, and local bodies to identify close to 4,000 changes a year, which translates into about 15 regulatory changes per day.
Yeah.
We did an analysis some time ago where we found that an MSME pharma company deals with about 600 of these changes in a year. So imagine how much effort is required, not just to craft a good compliance management and assurance-based, principle-based, digital, transparent, accountable, timely, and traceable compliance system in your organization, but also to stay on top of fluidity and on continuous changes in the environment. So with this thought, let me bring Rajesh or Dr. Rajesh into the conversation. He comes from a manufacturing background, one of the leading manufacturers of electronic components, very, very large market, $45 billion in India today, targeted to be $300 billion soon. Everything that we do these days revolves around electronics. One of the key problems in supply that we saw during COVID was electronic chips and components not being available. So we want to hear from you. What are your views around challenges in compliance management that you've seen from your experience?
Thank you, Rishi. Madam, Kamala Madam and Rishi has covered almost all the compliances, challenges. I don't know what to talk, but nevertheless, I would like to start with my example. Hope you remember the Titanic ship sink, what could be the reason for that? Beyond the reason of what we have seen in the film, because of the icebergs, we could understand that the compliances are like icebergs. So certain compliances are visible, certain compliances are not visible. The not visible compliances are hit the ship. Like ship is nothing but your organization. In organization, we are all traveling, from the top management to the board of directors to the lost employee. We are all traveling very, in a jolly way there. Suddenly some compliances come and hit us. So total organization is getting affected. So because of that, the compliance is very important. And another example also I can say that, like no parking. When we say the no parking, we cannot able to park the vehicle. Like that, no stopping. There is no stopping for compliances. It's every day, every day and every regulators are issuing some circular, some notification. So we cannot say that this is the last one and this is the final one. So there is no final, there is no full stop for any compliances. So they keep on going, only commas. So we cannot able to believe on particular compliances if we don't monitor properly there. So there should be, as Madam said, that the organization culture should be changed in such a way that, the entire compliance team, they should give importance for the compliances rather than they give importance only for the revenue. I agree, the organization is for the revenue because the revenue goes to end all the people. But at the same time, they should give importance for the compliances also. Apart from that, management plays a vital role in that. Say, for example, some management, I recollect the previous organization. I don't want to mention the name of the organization. At the same time, the management says that we should be 200% compliance. We are ready to pay the cost for it. So such kind of management which I have worked with. So they are ready to, if you go and say that this has to be done, they will do it immediately. They will spend much money also for that. Whereas the current organization where we are, this is a private organization. Now we are moving to the IPO. So this mindset is entirely different. No, private company, less compliances. They have been in this business for the 20 years, and slowly they are moving to the IPO. So now we need to teach them. This is the compliances. These are all the things that need to be done. And if it is a violation, what are the consequences will come? So everything we need to teach them, and slowly they are learning it. So management to management it differ, but it should come from the inner mind of the top management where they should give the importance for the compliances there. Then I would like to cover the SEBI regulators, RBI regulators, and Companies Act also there. For your information, for the SEBI as well as the RBI regulators also, they are not taking certain stands because of the surplus, because they themselves they are not aware that what are the surplus which just comes day by day. Any issues if it comes, they are not able to stand very firmly that saying that this is the solution for it. They also keep on postpone or something like that. Similar to Companies Act also. Companies Act, though it was come in 2013, the new act, we are in 2022. Still, we cannot be able to say that particular section. This is the full stop. It's keep on going there. So it's quite difficult for the human being to monitor this all the compliances to be intact. So therefore, digitization is very mandatory nowadays, so that at least if we miss the compliances, some other way the mechanism will have the trigger that compliances need to be done by executor, or some people has to be do or monitor that regulation. So by that way, the organization also helpful for doing this compliances.
So very well said, Dr. Rajesh. I often, when I speak to executive management, I have a question. Is your organization methodically compliant or accidentally compliant? Right? The word accidentally compliant is where you are assuming there is hope that you are compliant, that the right people are doing their job, that all the regulatory changes are caught in time, that all the licenses are being renewed as scheduled. Now, for an organization with branch footprint, and every retail, financial services, insurance, bank, NBFCs, they have a branch layout. Their branches are available all over the country, in many states and within a city, in many municipal corporations for larger cities. And unless there is a framework to know what was applicable, who was accountable, whether it was done or not, chances are that you are under an illusion that somehow you will be compliant.
Yes, obviously.
That's where I am often inclined to say hope is not a strategy. So anyway, I mean, great points made there. And one thing Kamala said, which I really liked, is compliance a way of doing your business? Or like you said, is compliance being done as a trigger to either going for an IPO or raising funds or going through a due diligence process, or some slap on the wrist by a regulator, or a question that your audit committee may have asked or a board may have put together or something like that? Now, that's a question that organizations have to ask themselves before they design a good compliance program. So at this point, I think we have discussed the challenges of managing compliance in India, right from numerous acts and rules which are applicable to hundreds and thousands of regulatory changes in a year, to knowing the impact and implication of that change, to knowing getting enough time before you can go ahead and implement those changes, to creating a culture of compliance so that it's not a one person's job in the organization. Everybody brings their shoulder to the load. There is awareness of regulatory obligations and leading ramifications of non-compliances, right from junior person all the way to the executives and board. So all of those are areas which need a significant amount of review before a good compliance program can be created. So at this point, let me take a pause, bring our audience via a survey. We often love to hear from our attendees, their views on compliance management via a battery of some small questions. You will see a quick survey on your screen, and I request all of you to take this survey. By way of this, we kind of get your view into constantly working towards creating a mature compliance ecosystem in the country. So there are just about 7 questions, right? It will take about 2 to 3 minutes for you to go through these questions, simple questions, multiple choice answers. I'm sure all of us like MCQs. Please go ahead and answer them. We'll give another 40 seconds. So those of you who are still thinking whether to answer it or not, trust me, your answers go a long way in helping us think about longer term approach. Kamala mentioned whether you are in it for long haul or you are in it for a year or two. Love that statement. So are you designing your organization and its compliance for the future without thinking about the full stop that Dr. Rajesh mentioned? I loved his concept of comma versus a full stop. Compliance is a journey, not a destination. So good. Another 10 seconds before we close the survey. And I really appreciate a number of you who've already finished the survey. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 5, 3, 2, and 1. Let's close the survey. I'll share the results towards the end.
I thought you missed some numbers in countdown.
Yeah, that was deliberate. I wanted to see people are paying attention. Okay, so I think time to move on to the next part of our debate and discussion. We talked about challenges, and it's always great to crib and complain, but it's equally important to know what should we change at our levels in order to create a far more mature, evolved practice of compliance within the company, how technology can play an important role in acting as sunlight. As they say, sunlight is the biggest disinfectant. You put sunlight on something and disinfection starts right there. In this case, transparency is my sunlight. How do we create a technology-based compliance organization where everybody knows what are our compliance obligations for the period, who is responsible, when are the important due dates, has it been completed or not, where is it pending, are there any major risk items which require intervention, are there any vendors who are causing non-compliance for us, are there any licenses which are coming up for expiration and need a renewal, are we doing all the right things, are we taking all the right actions, are we on top of all the regulatory updates. All of these are questions that a compliance officer and compliance team within an organization is faced with every day. So while the questions are numerous, but our panelists today, they come with a lot of experience around how to create that culture. We have problems, we know, but what are the solutions? As we walk away from this dialogue today, I would like each one of you to take some important notes on what you should do differently in your organization to create a culture of compliance so that one person's neck is not on the job. It's a combined effort. We sail or sink together where all of the right people are aware. So let me start with Kamala. Kamala, tell our audience today from your experience what they can do differently.
See, first and foremost thing is, compliance is not a hush-hush affair, it's a transparent affair. The more we communicate, more awareness and, more people will be aware that I can't be doing XYZ. So I think we should be, upbeat about it and speak about it more. Any change that comes in, please pass the waves to everyone. Don't carry the burden on only you and struggle, because without the business support, you won't be able to move anything at all. So how should the handshake between compliance and businesses be happening? Should that also be technology driven? Because, awareness means actually challenges. Compliance professionals also have somewhere become static. Read the circular of SEBI or read the circular of MCA and try to implement. Actually spreading awareness today, digital world provides umpteen number of opportunities. Simply summarize the requirements and convert it into a little 1-minute video. Today we see trailers of the movies for OTT platform and all in such nice way. Can we create something like that and pass it on to the organization rather than the traditional legal, hard legal language, which most people can't appreciate? So mindset change again comes into play here. First is, what can we do differently about the communication to people at your level, people below, people above? So how you will bring them up to the speed on changes? And it cannot be simply forwarding the circular is actually not even a hygiene factor according to. So that is the first step. Second is, what is the speed at which I need to implement? Is there an interim versus final destination? How do we really track both interim and the final destination? What I will do because of time pressure in a suboptimal way, and in the medium term, how do I ensure that I come up to the speed, is something that we need to definitely use. And wherever I'm doing an intermittent solution, short term, control points have to be absolutely good. It cannot be left to fate, like some of us were saying. Bhagwan ke bharose nahi chalega. So how do I manage this intermittent risk is something that we need to see. Even in technology implementation and all, we need to be very meticulous in understanding the requirement. See, basically, most of the software, I have some complaints on technology also. What happens is, in the beginning, there is a proper RFPs, proper design is there. But afterwards, every change, some patchwork is going on. This patchwork will run for 2 years, 3 years, and then you will not know which patch I applied for what purpose and what backend effect would be there. So can we say that at every periodicity, that say 6 monthly one, I will look at all the patch and convert them and make it into proper software change rather than patch. Patch is required. Like I was talking, interim, long term in the business, even on technology side, we need to be thinking on those lines. And thirdly, most importantly, qualitatively, how do I make sure that, bugs and all we identify, the testing of my software is keeping in mind various scenarios which we can visualize. Today, nobody has time to think, from what can go wrong from a customer standpoint. If that today, if technology fails, you are under biggest reputation threat that you can ever think of. Suppose you made some change and statement to customers went wrong, you're discredited on public media platform. So how do I really take care of quality? Because we are in a hurry on the live, a running vehicle tire I'm changing, but that cannot, take you long. So how do we ensure quality in what we do also is an important dimension.
So on this point, you mentioned many things around how to go about it. If there are 1 or 2 takeaways on how to create a culture of compliance as a compliance officer, what would be your 1 or 2 top points?
Compliance culture, somehow within organizations also, compliance is seen as a function with a stick, but we are there to facilitate business. How do I understand business at a granular level? I talk business language to business people. That is the starting point for a compliance culture, is what I would say.
Sure. While we are on this topic, I do invite our audience to ask questions. I'm glad there are already 2 questions, and I think we'll come to them as we get closer to the end of our debate and discussion today. Let me bring Dr. Rajesh into the conversation. Dr. Rajesh, based on your experience, what are those practices that our compliance officers here on the call today should listen in and take notes for?
Basically, the compliance officer, the entire company is thinking that only the compliance officer is responsible for entire compliance. That's a mindset of the organization.
Isn't that
That
what
should-
the name suggests, compliance officer?
Officer, yeah. So because of that, they feel that compliance officer will take care of it. But eventually, what will happen? That is a responsibility of everyone, every activity, every team, every department. They need to do their own compliances. Then, apart from that, the compliance officer is the sitting on the head of everyone and checking that and regulating, monitoring that whether the compliance has been done or not. Otherwise, what is the purpose of everyone is working in that organization? Only compliance officer is sufficient. CEO and compliance officer finished. Then what is the purpose
I
of
think
the entire?
that's an important point. How do we go about doing that? I think theory is great. Everybody appreciates that theory, that compliance officer is just a representative to make sure that all the compliances are being done. But Kamala pointed out that compliance is actually a functional organization.
Correct.
Labor laws cannot be done by the compliance officer. It has to be taken care of by teams in HR. But compliance officer is still accountable for making sure all the compliances with the law of the land are done and a certification is provided to the board and so on and so forth.
Yes.
The challenge here is how do we make the connection with these dots?
Only through digitization. Only through
Yeah.
digitization.
Tell us more. How should we go about it? Because I think devil lies in the detail. While it's important that everybody bring their shoulder to the load, what is challenging is how do we implement it so that people just can't get off the hook? They are responsible. There is sunlight being thrown at their outcomes. They get benefited in case of demonstrating good compliance behaviors with better bonuses and better promotions. And they get a slap on the wrist in case of bad behavior. How do we bring that about?
The people, as you know, they have their mindsets of doing the compliance at the last moment. That is also one of the important thing. Change has to be done in the culturally. That, you know, they think that, you know, last date is there, last time is there, so we will complete it later on, like that. So once the complaints is trigger, immediately they need to do it. That is how it has to be done by every department. So department wise, say for example, HR department has their own compliances. So they might be having their team. So that team has to be report to the HR department, and the HR department in turn to the report to the compliance officer. And similarly to the other department, marketing department, sales department, purchase
At this point,
department.
let me ask Kamala what her thought process is on this subject.
Yes, I was just, bubbling with enthusiasm to respond to this actually. See, basically we are talking about being prepared, proactive. So I would think framework should be two-tier framework. Each function has various compliance requirements. They should be listed down. And as against that, if any variation is there, volatility is there, for some reason, some process did not work, which has a compliance angle, how do we pop it up to the center? So two-tier structure for each of the function, you have a framework, and that gets bubbled up to the central. So, and compliance itself will also do. There are certain direct compliances that are responsibility of compliance department. They should also be doing at any given point of time in an aggregated manner. You should know which function is strong on what compliances, weak on what, and what is my approach to improve wherever we are weak. For example, if a trading department is there, they are weak on some particular process. It is okay. We cannot be perfect in all. But can we have a graded approach where within next 3 months, I'm going to up this process? So the framework has to be two-tier. On an ongoing basis, you should have a dashboard which will tell you which department is strong on what and which department is weak on what. So that if a missile comes, you're able to respond in a jiffy.
Sure. And how do we make sure that all the regulatory changes that are happening all the time in the ecosystem, all the people who are responsible, and by the way, based on our experience, we see that a mid to a large size organization has a range of between 50 and 150 people who touch compliances in some form and shape across departments. I mean, I'm talking from experience, 50 to 150 is a typical range. Now imagine all of these are located in different parts of the organization, different geographies. They sit sometimes in different entities where the group compliance officer is responsible for making sure all of them sing from the same page. So that is a challenge. And I think there is no simple way of answering it. And Kamala, I'll give you an example and then I'll ask you to come back on that. From my experience working in this area for close to a decade now and talking to a lot of senior executives, oftentimes I ask them one question, and which is, do you think your organization is compliant? And I've never seen any officer at a CEO, MD kind of a level say, yes, my organization is compliant. You will see the answer more like, yeah, I think so.
We're mostly there.
Yeah, I think so. And then my follow-up question is, based on your experience, how many compliances do you think are a part of your organization? And funnily enough, answer most cases that I have received is a number between 100 and 200.
See, we are diversified into multiple businesses. So our number will be high because of the multiplicity of the regulator.
No, but I'm telling you, one MSME in
Even a single,
single state, single entity,
I know,
998 unique compliances in a year.
That is true.
How can a large organization of which this gentleman or lady is a CEO can have 100 to 200? Where I'm going with this conversation, Kamala, is the lack of insight into compliance obligation at the highest level within most organizations. They think it's a 100-200 compliances ho jayenge. One of the largest oil companies in India, and I'm not at the liberty of taking names, I was speaking to their executive leadership team, and they said they report only on 35 acts. And I told them an MSME deals with 65 acts on an annual basis in a typical scenario. So again, the point being, we have a problem of information asymmetry between doers, reviewers, approvers, heads, executives, and there is no single page from which all of these people are singing from. And I think the first step in this journey is to make sure that all of them sing from the same page, that we have 2,223 compliances under 68 acts, of which we do about 698 filings in the year. I think that would be one big success if we can get to that.
So actually, a valid point that you're discussing. But having said that, these days technology is available, in plenty. So technology should come to our rescue in a sense. See, though we are talking thousands and lakhs, all are not at the same degree. So I would think we bucket all the compliance requirements into ABC category, B and C, where, actually all cannot deserve equal attention. So at least critical to your business, at least are you totally compliant? You're on mute.
That's where a software solution like ours, for example, we bucket them by risk: critical, high, medium, and low. We have created definitions where any non-compliance leading to jail term for KMPs, directors, independent board members is critical. Doesn't matter how people in the organization perceive it. If somebody can go to jail and 2 out of 5 compliance in India, it needs to be critical, right? Something where you can lose your license, registration, permission, consent order, lockdowns can happen. It needs to be high, right? Because although the entire business is
right. So the point I was trying to make is, though there are a number of compliance requirements, we have to bucket them and grade them on criticality. Not to say that lower end is not important. It is important. But there is only so much bandwidth that different tiers of management can give. C category can be well handled by the departmental heads or a junior set of people, whereas highly critical, if regulator is going to hold a call to you and say, what happened, why your technology is down, he cannot say, okay, I don't know. So
Madam, I differ on this. Compliance is a compliance. I don't see that as a high priority or low priority. Compliance is a compliance. That is how I would like to see.
I think, Dr. Rajesh, you are coming from a view that every compliance is required to be done. Some may be done before others, some may deserve senior management attention, is what Kamala is saying.
We also believe that every compliance has to be fulfilled and met. But there are certain compliances for which directly top management's neck would be on block. There are, see, what I mean to say is compliance is always equated with the gravity of the issue on hand and the impact it is creating. Okay. Based on that, we need to bucket them. Otherwise, everything everywhere, then CEO will be worrying about some last mile, leaving out something very, very important.
And totally agree with you. Everything is important and should be done. But what bubbles up to the highest levels attention may be different based on the residual risk that non-compliance or contraventions end up creating.
And it also goes at the same breath that responsibility, accountability, fixing also will happen with the criticality. Not that there will be compliances for which nobody is responsible. No.
Yes, totally. Now, I want to bring up another point, and feel free to pick up this point. Oftentimes we see business performance when you talk about revenue, cumulative revenue, profits, EBITDA. There are clear incentives spelled out in the organization for doing that, right? You do this much and you will get accelerated incentive program at the end of the year, promotions happen faster and so on. Do you see any merit in having compliance oriented goals on the KRA sheets of people who are responsible for them? So non-compliances or penalties or some of these things should affect their careers and should affect their incentives or financials at the end of the year. Do you think any merit is there in doing something like this to create a culture of compliance?
So just before I respond on that, I have to say this statement. It's my favorite statement. Compliance is like oxygen. When it is present, nobody recognizes. When it is absent, you no longer exist.
Classical example.
So having said that, whether incentivization, see, incentive does not necessarily mean only financial incentive. It is also simple things like recognition and rewards. See, somebody fought the case well for you and demonstrated compliance to the highest level and avoided a regulatory action, and you should be singing about that fellow, no, within your organization. But not many organizations do that. They're even, thinking, how will I tell my people that I had an issue with regulator? So though these orders are all in public domain, within the organization, people are skeptical about talking about these things. I think recognition and reward is very important. And even for the business people, when you're incentivizing them, see, balance scorecard these days talks about balancing between business numbers and the qualitative aspect. So quality also should get linked to their performance, not only the business numbers. This is my strong view.
Sorry about that. I was speaking on mute. So Dr. Rajesh, do you have any opinion on the subject?
No, nothing. So Madam has explained everything. She said very one dotted line, no oxygen. So people never know that until the oxygen is if the oxygen is available, people will happy. Then people will know only if there is any problem. So as such, compliance is awesome.
Exactly. Excellent. So I think there are two questions that we have received from the audience, and I want to put them out there for discussion. First one is, how shall we determine which compliance software is good for our organization? What are the parameters that one should look at? Anybody wants to take that up?
See, basically, I believe technology always should match the ethos and principles of the organization. So you can't first decide technology and then figure out, it is not fitting the way I operate. And for everything, you will start creating exception. Then software remains just for namesake and everything is full of exceptions. So that is not the way to select a software. First of all, we should define our objectives. And if I'm buying a standard product, I should be willing to make changes within my organization rather than asking for customization on the software for every small little thing. There will be some specific customization required, but for every line item, if you start creating exception, then you please don't buy a software.
Absolutely. What else, Dr. Rajesh? Anything
yes,
from your side?
So the software should help the company to comply with the compliances. Most of the software which I understood, it is become a compliance. Complying the compliance software is become a compliance. So that become a difficult for the organization or the management. They feel that to track that compliances, they should be engaged one person to track that the compliances. Their mail has to become the particular person. If any mail is unnoticed, then again the particular person is getting into that problem. So that should be avoided. So the compliance tool it should be in such a way that if suppose the particular compliance is not done, it should not end up with triggering the mail to the responsible person, but also it should go to the top management and should be noticed to them. And one more thing is, say for example, in my department, I'm saying that Say, for example, now we need to file some form. Now the software should support us to file the form rather than telling that you file the form like that. So the software should help us to file the form. Example, for example, FCTRS or FCGPR, RBI regulator forms there. So those documents, we require the support from the softwares. Support in the sense, software will not file the form, but certain documentation should be given by the software so that it will be helpful for the compliance officer also to comply that. That would be my suggestion.
Sure. Well, there are some points that I could add. The software should be easy to use so that the last compliance professional in the company at whatever level of education and tech savviness should be able to use it. And I'll give an example of, say, an Apple iOS platform. Many years ago, I gifted iPhone to my mom, who's now in 70s. And my mom quickly asked me if there is a user manual, how should she learn to use this? And that got me thinking, and I realized that Apple never produced a user manual for using an iPhone. She took half an hour, figured out how to make a call, another half an hour, figured out how to save a number. And 2 hours later, she was already using WhatsApp for exchanging photos and this and that. So that's how easy to use a software needs to be. It needs to be on the mobile platform. Today, we take mobile everywhere we go. It's omnipresent. You will see mobile in people's hands when they are taking private pictures also. So if something is not available on the mobile, that's a problem. And one other thing, law of the land is very complex and very fluid in India. You should definitely look at a software which actually comes integrated with the law of the land with 69,233 compliances across 1,536 acts. Because if that is not there, this software is not going to take you too far. So those are some of my inputs on the subject. Another question we have, is there any formal education or course to learn compliances in India? Now, very interesting question, close to my heart. And I do want to say I went to some of the best, by God's grace, educational institutions in India, IIT and IIM. And unfortunately, even after completing my postgraduate program in MBA, when I came out, I had no idea of what compliances mean or how to do compliances. So educational institutions obviously can do a better job of preparing all of us on compliance, but there is a clear question that after studying law or CS or CA, how can we learn compliance? So I will leave this to practitioners and let them answer this question.
So Rishi, I'm enthusiastically trying to respond. See, one is the professional qualification is valid, at that point in time when you pass out or whatever, but on a continuous basis, you need to upskill yourself for the various changes that come. So far as financial services is concerned, especially the securities market is concerned, I can tell you, NISM has specifically designed courses which keeps getting updated as well. You can do those course and also end up getting a certificate. National Stock Exchange, Bombay Stock Exchange, both of them also offer courses which will be a refresher course. Just because you passed in flying color, it doesn't mean that you're an expert on all law, but you'll be better off than not knowing anything at all. So I think there are opportunities available. People should make use of it. You're on mute.
Continued education is the way to go.
Yeah.
Yes, education is not an end. It's a dotted line.
And there is a comma, not a full stop, right?
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, we are at the top of the hour at 4 o'clock. I hope our audience got some ideas. Compliance is a journey, not a destination. Technology has taken our world by a storm. If you look at the last 10 years, and I say this with a lot of pride, India by far is leading the way as far as digitization is concerned. Kamala probably is one of the torch bearers in financial services industry. We are doing billions of digital payments a month. Billions of dollars are going into mutual funds. Our insurance sector is on fire. The way insurance penetration is going on over the next few years, it will change. The way financial services inclusion with banking, NBFCs is going on. Some of these will be in a different form, shape, and orbit at the end of this decade. Same thing with electronics, where Dr. Rajesh comes from. It's paving the way for a digital future, laying the foundation and plumbing, whether it's mobile phones, digital devices, it's 4G, 5G networks, all of these utilizes chips or EVs now or IoTs now. I mean, all of these are important areas which are going to see significant growth in the country going forward. I think structural reforms is the way to go. Fiscal and monetary policy changes are at the end of their capability. Government is doing whatever it can. Corporates have to start adopting technology in order to bring about transparent, accountable, timely, and traceable culture. So on that thought, let me thank Kamala and Dr. Rajesh for taking the time and speaking their hearts and minds on our panel today. We hope to hear from both of them very soon. Until next time, your host Rishi Agrawal signs off. Thanks again. You've been a wonderful audience. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks to audience. Thank you.